1 year after the sky first turned red, it was finally clear again. General Unipark stood in the ruins of Seoul and watched the last Valkyrie ship disappear into the stars. It was running. They were all running now. The hunters had become the hunted. Around her stood the people who had made this victory possible. Sergeant Tien Cho, now promoted to captain, his face scarred from a dozen battles, but his eyes still fierce. Dr. Sujin Han, thinner than before, but with a new fire in her spirit. Lieutenant Hyun Shin, who would learn to decode an entire alien civilization. And Yoon Ji-yoon, the nurse who had become a legend, standing on legs the doctor said would never work again. They were survivors. They were fighters. They were the heart of a resistance that had refused to die. "It is over," Hyun said quietly. "They are leaving." Yuna nodded, but she did not smile. "The battle is over. The war is not." She was right. The Valkyrie had been defeated, but they had not been destroyed. Somewhere out there in the galaxy, their empire still existed. Other species still suffered under their rule. And Earth was no longer hidden. The universe knew about humanity now. The final battle had been brutal. Vorath had ordered a desperate last attack, throwing every remaining ship and soldier at the human defenses. He believed that one decisive blow would break the resistance. He was wrong. The humans were ready. They had spent months preparing, building weapons, training soldiers, fortifying positions. When the Valkyrie attacked, they met a wall of fire and steel that would not break. Admiral Ji-hoon Park commanded the space defense. His fleet had grown to over 200 vessels, each one better than the last. They fought in the darkness between worlds, dancing around enemy ships and striking from unexpected angles. Ji-hoon lost half his fleet that day, but the Valkyrie lost everything. Major Daeun Wang led the ground forces in the final defense of the planet. She had 40,000 soldiers under her command, armed with weapons that combined human ingenuity and stolen alien technology. They fought for 7 days without rest. They held every position. They did not retreat. When the shooting finally stopped, fewer than 300 Valkyrie soldiers were still alive. They surrendered, the first time in their species' history that warriors of the Dominion had laid down their weapons. They expected to be killed. Instead, they were given food and medical care. They were treated with a dignity they had never shown their victims. And they were asked a simple question: why? "We were afraid of you," one of the prisoners admitted to Dr. Sujin Han during an interrogation. "We have conquered so many worlds. We thought it was our right, our destiny. We never imagined a species could fight back like this." "What did you imagine?" Sujin asked. The alien was quiet for a long moment. "We imagined that strength meant victory. That power meant control. That weaker species would always submit to stronger ones." It looked at Sujin with its 3 strange eyes. "You have shown us that we were wrong. Strength is not just about weapons. It is about will. And your species has more will than any we have ever encountered." The surviving Valkyrie were eventually allowed to leave. They limped back to their empire, carrying stories of their defeat. They spoke of a world that would not break, of soldiers who fought until their last breath, of civilians who became warriors overnight, of a species that had been at war with itself for so long that they had become impossibly dangerous. The Valkyrie Dominion heard these stories and made a decision. Earth was to be left alone. Any species that could defeat a full invasion force was not worth the cost of conquest, but humanity did not trust the aliens to keep their distance forever. The war had taught them a terrible lesson. The universe was not empty, and it was not safe. Other predators were out there, looking for prey. Earth could not afford to be vulnerable again. In laboratories around the world, engineers worked on captured Valkyrie technology. They studied the ships, the weapons, the shields. They learned how to build faster engines and stronger armor. Within 5 years, humanity had its first true starships. Within 10 years, they had a fleet that could defend the entire solar system. Chief Engineer Sun Wukong led the first test flight beyond Earth's orbit. He took the ship to Mars and back in less than a day, a journey that would have been impossible before the invasion. When he returned, he stood before the assembled scientists and spoke words that would be remembered for generations. "The galaxy thought we were weak," he said. "They thought we were children, alone and helpless on our little world. They were wrong. We are not children. We are not prey. We are humanity. And we are just getting started." The reconstruction of Earth took decades. Cities were rebuilt. Farms were replanted. Hospitals were restored. The scars of war would never fully heal, but humans had always been good at surviving. They were even better at learning. President Min-Ho-Ru did not live to see the completion of the first starship. He died 3 years after the war ended, worn out by the weight of his responsibilities. But before he died, he gave one last order: never forget. Memorials were built in every city. The names of the dead were carved into walls of black stone. Schools taught children about the invasion, about the resistance, about the ordinary people who had chosen to fight instead of surrender. And every year, on the anniversary of the first attack, humanity looked up at the stars and remembered. General Una Park retired 5 years after the war. She had spent enough time fighting. She wanted to rest, to heal, to remember the world before the aliens came. But she remained a symbol, a reminder of what humanity could achieve when pushed to the edge. On the 10th anniversary of the victory, she gave a speech in the rebuilt capital. Millions watched as she stood before the crowd, older now but still strong, still fierce. 10 years ago, she said, "We were surprised. We were hurt. We were nearly destroyed. But we survived. Not because we had the best weapons. Not because we had the most soldiers. Not because we had any advantage at all." She paused. "We survived because we refused to accept defeat. We survived because every single one of us chose to fight. We survived because that is who we are." She looked up at the clear blue sky, at the sun shining down on a world that was free. "The universe is watching us now. Other species know we exist. Some of them fear us. Some of them respect us. And some of them, perhaps, are wondering if we can be trusted." She turned back to the crowd. "Let them wonder. Let them watch. Let them see what kind of species we are. We are not conquerors. We are not destroyers. But we are also not victims. We will defend our home. We will protect our people. And if anyone threatens us again, we will meet them with the same fire and determination that we showed the Velthari." Our voice rose with each word. We are humanity. We have walked through fire and come out stronger. We have faced the darkness and refused to blink. And now, for the first time in our history, we are reaching for the stars. She pointed toward the sky, toward the ships that were even now being built in orbital shipyards. Those ships will carry our children to other worlds. They will carry our dreams to distant suns. And they will carry a message to every species in the galaxy. A message that says, Earth remembers. Earth does not forgive. And Earth is coming. The crowd erupted in cheers. But Una was not finished. "But remember this too," she said, her voice growing quieter. "We fight not because we love war. We fight because we love life. We fight because we love our families, our friends, our world. Never forget that. Never become the monsters we defeated. Be strong, but also be kind. Be fierce, but also be fair. Be warriors, but also be human." She stepped back from the podium, her speech finished. Around her, the survivors of the invasion stood together, remembering the fallen, honoring the heroes. looking toward the future. The stars were waiting, and humanity was ready to answer. Far out in the darkness of space, a small Valkyrie ship moved quietly through the void. Inside, the creature called Vorath sat alone, exiled by his own people for his failure. He was old now, broken by defeat and shame. But he still remembered. He remembered the day he had descended on Earth, so confident of victory. He remembered the first missiles rising to meet him. He remembered the endless battles, the mounting casualties, the terrible realization that he had chosen the wrong enemy. And he remembered the message that President Minho-Ru had broadcast to the galaxy. We do not negotiate with invaders. We bury them. Vorath looked out at the stars and felt something he had never expected to feel: respect. These humans, these primitive creatures from a small blue world, had taught him the most important lesson of his long life. Power is not everything. Will matters more. And somewhere out there, in the vast darkness of the universe, a species that had been alone for so long was finally reaching for the stars. Not as prey, not as victims, but as something new, something dangerous, something wonderful. Humanity was coming, and the galaxy would never be the same. 4 months after the first ships fell from the sky, humanity stopped running and started hunting. Admiral Ji-hoon Park stood on the bridge of a ship that should not exist. It was built from the wreckage of destroyed vessels and stolen alien technology, assembled in secret shipyards hidden beneath mountains. The engineers called it ugly. Ji-hoon called it beautiful. All ships report ready, his communications officer announced. Operation Crimson Dawn is a go. Ji-hoon looked at the fleet spread out before him. 57 vessels, each one a miracle of desperate engineering. They were slower than Valkyrie ships. They were weaker. Their shields lasted only minutes under sustained fire. But they were enough. They had to be enough. All units advance, Ji-hoon ordered. Today we take back our sky. The battle began at dawn over the East Sea. The Valkyrie had stationed 3 of their massive ships in the region, guarding the approaches to the Korean peninsula. They detected the human fleet immediately and moved to intercept. They expected an easy victory. They were wrong. The human ships scattered in all directions, moving in patterns that seemed random but were actually carefully planned. While the Valkyrie focused on the larger vessels, smaller attack boats raced in from every angle. They carried missiles designed by Dr. Sujin Han's team, weapons that targeted the specific frequency of Valkyrie shields. First target shields at 40%, reported the tactical officer. 30%. 20. Fire everything, Ji-hoon ordered. 100 missiles streaked toward the first Valkyrie ship. Without its shields, the massive vessel could not survive. Explosions ripped through its hull. Fire erupted from every deck. Slowly, majestically, the mountain-sized ship began to fall from the sky. The humans cheered. But Ji-hoon did not. He knew this was just the beginning. On the ground, Major Dan Wang led the largest ground assault since the invasion began. Her target was the Valkyrie's primary base in what had once been the Gobi Desert. The aliens had built a massive fortress there, a staging ground for their conquest of Asia. They Yuan had 15,000 soldiers under her command. The enemy had 45,000. By any reasonable calculation, she should lose. But Dan was not interested in reasonable calculations. The Valkyrie fight in formations, she had told her officers before the battle. They move in straight lines. They follow orders without question. They've never faced an enemy that changes tactics in the middle of a fight. She had smiled grimly. We are going to show them what chaos looks like. The attack began with a sandstorm. Human engineers had modified weather satellites to create artificial storms, blocking Valkyrie sensors and communications. Then the ground forces struck from 7 different directions at once. Dan led the main assault personally. driving a modified tank that she had nicknamed the Beast. It was covered in armor plates, taken from destroyed alien vehicles, and carried weapons that combined human and Velthari technology. It was loud, it was ugly, and it was extremely effective at killing aliens. "Push forward," she shouted into her radio. "Do not let them regroup. Keep them confused." The Velthari defenders were thrown into disorder. They had prepared for a traditional assault, a straight fight that they would surely win. Instead, they faced attacks from every direction, forces that appeared and disappeared like ghosts, weapons they had never seen before. By noon, the outer defenses had fallen. By sunset, human soldiers were fighting in the corridors of the fortress itself. Dayan lost 3,000 soldiers that day. The Velthari lost 12,000. It was the first major ground victory of the war. In his command ship, Vorath watched the battle reports with growing horror. His fleet was bleeding. His ground forces were being pushed back. Everywhere he looked, humans were winning battles they should have lost. "Send a message to their leaders," he said finally. "Tell them we are willing to negotiate." General Kethrin stared at him. "Negotiate, my lord? We have never. I know what we have never done." Vorath's voice was tired, defeated. "But I also know what is happening. We are losing. If we do not find another way, we will lose everything." The message was broadcast across the planet. For the first time, the invaders were not demanding surrender. They were asking for peace. President Minharu received the message in his underground bunker in the mountains. He was an old man, worn thin by 4 months of war. He had lost his wife in the initial attack. He had lost countless friends and colleagues. He had lost everything except his will to fight. He read the Velthari offer carefully. They would withdraw from half of the planet. They would stop attacking cities. They would negotiate a permanent settlement that gave them resources in exchange for peace. It was a reasonable offer. Some of his advisors urged him to accept it. They spoke of the millions already dead, the millions more who would die if the war continued. They spoke of mercy and pragmatism and survival. Minho listened to all of them. Then he stood up and walked to the communication console. "Open a channel to all frequencies," he said. "Broadcast to the entire planet and to every alien ship in orbit." He waited until the technicians confirmed the connection. Then he spoke. "This message is for Vorath of the Velthari Dominion, and for every human being still fighting for our world." He paused, gathering his thoughts. 4 months ago, you came to our home without warning. You burned our cities. You killed our children. You told us to kneel or be erased. And now, because we have hurt you, because we have made you bleed, you want to negotiate. His voice grew stronger with each word. "I have one answer for you. We do not negotiate with invaders. We do not make deals with those who murder our people. We do not accept peace from the monsters who have brought us war." He looked directly at the camera. "You asked us to kneel. We refused. You tried to destroy us. We survived. And now you want us to stop fighting?" He shook his head slowly. "No. The fighting stops when you leave our world. Every ship, every soldier, every trace of your presence. Until then, we will hunt you. We will hurt you. We will make you pay for every life you have taken." He leaned forward, and his eyes burned with cold fire. "You came here expecting prey. You found something else. You found a species that does not know how to surrender. You found humanity. And we will bury you." The message ended. Across the planet, humans who had been fighting for 4 months heard their president's words. They did not cheer. They did not celebrate. They simply tightened their grips on their weapons and prepared to fight harder. That night, humanity launched a secret weapon that even the Resistance had not known about. Nuclear missiles, hidden in deep bunkers since the Cold War, were aimed not at cities, but at the sky. Dr. Sujin. Han's research had revealed a critical weakness in Valkyrie shields. They could be overwhelmed by the electromagnetic, pulsive nuclear explosions. 12 missiles rose from hidden silos around the world. They climbed through the atmosphere and found their targets among the orbiting alien fleet. 3 of the massive mountain ships fell burning from the sky. In his command chair, Vorath watched his fleet die and finally understood the truth. This was not a conquest. This was a war. And wars could be lost. Send a message to the homeworld, he said quietly. Tell them we need immediate reinforcement. Tell them this species is not like the others. Tell them. He stopped. Tell them what, my lord? Asked Catherine. Vorath looked at the burning remains of his fleet on the tactical display. Tell them we may have made a terrible mistake. Lieutenant Hyung Shin had not left her workstation in 6 weeks. Her eyes were red from staring at screens. Her fingers were covered in bandages from typing too fast on broken keyboards. She had lost 8 kilograms because she kept forgetting to eat. And she did not care about any of it, because she was close. So very close, the Valkyrie communicated through a complex system of encoded signals. Their transmissions bounced between ships and ground units thousands of times per second. Human technology could detect these signals, but understanding them had seemed impossible. The patterns were too strange, too alien, too different from anything on Earth. But Hyung was stubborn. She had been a signals intelligence officer for 10 years. She had cracked codes from hostile nations that everyone said were unbreakable. And she had promised herself that she would crack this one too. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning. She was looking at a captured Valkyrie communication device when she noticed something. The patterns were not random. They were not even truly complex. They were just different. The Valkyrie used a mathematical system based on 3s instead of 10s. Once she understood that, everything began to make sense. I have it, she whispered. Then, louder, I have it. The other analysts in the underground bunker stopped their work and stared at her. Commander Sung-ho, the officer in charge of the intelligence unit, walked quickly to her station. You cracked their communications? He asked. Not completely, but enough. Hyung's hands were shaking as she pointed at her screen. This transmission was sent from the main ship 3 hours ago. It is a request to their homeworld. They are asking for reinforcements. Sung-ho frowned. That does not sound good. No, you do not understand. Hyung looked up at him with eyes that burned with exhaustion and triumph. They are scared. The message says they have lost over 8,000 soldiers. They have never lost more than 100 in a single conquest before. They do not know what to do with us. The news spread through the resistance networks within hours. Humanity had hurt the invaders. Humanity had frightened them. It was not victory, not yet. But it was hope. 300 kilometers to the east, Chief Engineer Sun-Woo Kang stood inside the wreckage of a Valkyrie shuttle and tried not to laugh with joy. The craft had crashed 2 weeks ago, shot down by a lucky missile strike over the Yellow Sea. Recovery teams had dragged it ashore and hidden it in an abandoned factory before the aliens could find it. Now Sun-Woo and his team were taking it apart piece by piece. The propulsion system uses magnetic fields to manipulate gravity, he said to his assistants. It is not magic. It is just very advanced physics. Can we build one? Asked Hyunjin, his chief assistant. Not exactly. But we can understand enough to improve our own technology. Sun-Woo touched the strange metal of the ship's hull with something like reverence. They are not gods. They are just engineers like us. They have had more time, more resources. But they think the same way we do. He pulled out a small component that glowed with soft blue light. This is their shield generator. It creates a field that absorbs energy from incoming weapons. But look here. He pointed to a series of crystals inside the device. It has a recharge rate. If we hit them faster than it can recharge, the shield fails. This information was sent to every resistance unit on the planet. Within days, human forces changed their tactics. Instead of single attacks, they launched coordinated strikes from multiple directions. They hit enemy positions with everything they had, overwhelming Velthury shields through sheer volume of fire. It worked. An engine. Private Yoonji Yoon listened to the briefing with cold determination. Her unit had been trapped in an abandoned factory for 2 days. Velthury patrols surrounded them. There was no way out. She was 22 years old. Before the invasion, she had been studying to become a nurse. She had wanted to help people, to heal them. Now she was learning a very different set of skills. "We cannot fight our way out," her squad leader said. "We do not have enough ammunition. We do not have enough people. Then we should surrender?" asked one of the younger soldiers. He was barely 18, and his voice trembled. "No." Yoonji stood up and walked to the window. Outside, she could see the Velthury patrol moving closer. 12 of them. Too many for her small group to handle. "We do not surrender, but we can still hurt them." She had spent the last 12 hours working in silence, moving through the factory and collecting everything useful. Industrial chemicals, fuel canisters, old batteries. She had connected them all with wires stripped from machinery. The factory was now one giant bomb. "You cannot be serious," said the squad leader. "I am very serious." Yoonji checked the detonator in her pocket. "When they come inside, I will walk toward them with my hands raised. They will think I am surrendering. When they get close enough, I will trigger the explosion. You will die." Yoonji smiled. It was not a happy smile. "Maybe, but they will die too. And the rest of you can escape through the maintenance tunnels while they are dealing with the fire." There was a long silence. Then the squad leader nodded slowly. "You are either the bravest person I have ever met, or the craziest." "Perhaps both," Yoonji said. "Now go. Get to the tunnels. I will give you 5 minutes." The squad slipped away through the darkness. Yoonji watched them go, then turned to face the door. Her heart was beating fast, but her hands were steady. She had made her choice. The Velthury entered the factory 30 seconds later. 12 soldiers in black armor, weapons glowing with deadly energy. Their leader saw Yoonji standing alone in the middle of the floor, hands raised above her head. "Surrender accepted," the leader said in broken human language. "You will be processed for." Yoonji pressed the button. The explosion was enormous. It shattered windows a kilometer away. It sent a pillar of fire into the night sky. It killed all 12 Velthury soldiers instantly, and somehow, impossibly, Yoonji survived. She woke up 3 days later in a resistance hospital, covered in burns and bandages. The doctors told her she should be dead. The blast had thrown her through a wall before the main explosion reached her. It was luck, they said. Pure luck. Yoonji did not believe in luck. She believed in her story spread through the resistance faster than any other. The girl who had become a bomb. The nurse who had killed 12 aliens and lived to tell about it. She became a legend, a symbol of human defiance in the command ship above. Varath read the reports about the factory incident and felt that cold feeling in his chest again. Fear. He was definitely feeling fear now. "They are learning," General Catherine said quietly. "Every day they adapt. They find new ways to hurt us. They do not fight like any species we have encountered before." "What are you suggesting?" Varath asked. "I am suggesting that we reconsider our approach, my lord. Perhaps negotiation? No." Varath's voice was sharp. "We do not negotiate with lesser species. We conquer them. That is what we have always done. That is what we will do here." But even as he spoke, he knew something had changed. This was not the easy conquest he had expected. These humans, these primitive creatures with their crude weapons and short lives, were teaching the Velthari something they had forgotten long ago. They were teaching them that conquest has a price, and humanity was determined to make that price as high as possible. In her hospital bed, Yunji opened her eyes and looked at the ceiling. She could not move without pain. She would carry scars for the rest of her life. But she was alive, and 12 of the enemy were dead. It was enough. For now, it was enough. The tunnels smelled like oil and old water. Sergeant Taiyin Cho pressed his back against the cold concrete wall and listened to the sounds above. Heavy footsteps. The strange humming of alien weapons powering up. The click-click-click of Velthari claws on broken pavement. 3 days had passed since the invasion began. The aliens controlled the skies completely. Their ships floated over ruined cities like dark clouds, shooting down anything that tried to fly. The surface belonged to them now, but the underground was different. Taiyin had 17 soldiers with him. They had been cut off from their main unit when Seoul fell. For 2 days, they had moved through subway tunnels, maintenance passages, and storm drains. They had not slept more than 4 hours total. They had eaten whatever they could find in abandoned stores and vending machines, and they had killed 9 Velthari. The first kill had been an accident. A patrol had cornered them in a tunnel near Daegu Station. Taiyin had expected to die, but Private Johnny had thrown a fire extinguisher at one of the aliens, and Taiyin had noticed something important. The creature flinched. They could feel pain. After that, everything changed. The humans stopped running and started hunting. They learned that Velthari armor was strong against energy weapons, but weak against explosives. They learned that the aliens could see in the dark, but had poor hearing. They learned that Velthari soldiers always stayed in groups of 4. Never alone. So the humans attacked in groups of 6. 2 targets at the station entrance, whispered Corporal Warm from her position at the tunnel corner. She was small and quick, the best scout Taiyin had. Standard patrol formation. Taiyin nodded and made hand signals to his team. They had developed their own silent language over the past 3 days. Words were dangerous underground. 4 soldiers moved to flank positions. 2 prepared grenades. The rest aimed their rifles at the spots where Velthari armor was weakest, the joints between shoulder and arm, the thin membrane at the neck. Taiyin counted down on his fingers. 3, 2, 1. The grenades flew through the air and exploded against the Velthari patrol. Before the smoke cleared, bullets were already tearing into alien flesh. The Velthari died without ever seeing their attackers. Move, Taiyin ordered. They will send reinforcements. They disappeared back into the darkness of the tunnels, taking the weapons and armor from the dead aliens. Everything could be used. Everything was precious. 200 kilometers to the south, in what had once been a university research building in Daejeon, Dr. Sujin Han had not slept in 40 hours. Her eyes burned. Her hands shook from too much caffeine and not enough food. But she could not stop working. Before the invasion, she had been an agricultural biochemist. Her research focused on helping crops grow faster and resist disease. It was peaceful work, helpful work. Now she was learning a very different kind of chemistry. Carbon-based, she muttered, examining a sample of Velthari blood under her microscope. Complex proteins similar to reptilian biology. High iron content. And very, very flammable. She had a team of 12 scientists with her. They had gathered from different universities and laboratories across the region, drawn together by radio communications that the resistance had established. None of them were weapons experts, but they were all fast learners. "I think I have something," said Dr. Yemen, her youngest assistant. He was only 25, a graduate student who had been studying plant genetics a week ago. Now, He was mixing chemicals that could eat through metal. Sujin walked to his workstation and examined his notes. He had combined industrial cleaning agents with modified enzymes to create an acid that specifically targeted the molecular structure of Volturi armor. It was clever. It was terrifying. And it would work. "Make more," she told him. "Make as much as you can." On the coast, Commander Jinho Beek stood on the deck of a fishing boat and watched the horizon. His real ships were gone, destroyed in the first hours of the invasion. The Navy had been proud of those ships. Missile frigates, destroyers, one aircraft carrier. All of them were now wreckage at the bottom of the sea. But Jinho was still commander, and he still had a job to do. He had gathered a fleet of 30 vessels. Fishing boats, cargo ships, private yachts, even a few tourist ferries. He had armed them with whatever weapons the resistance could provide. Old artillery pieces, machine guns, even homemade launchers that fired modified propane tanks filled with explosives. It was ridiculous. It was suicide. And somehow, it was working. The Valkyrie did not consider boats a threat. Their ships focused on aircraft and ground forces. They did not expect attacks from the water. Jinho had used that mistake to destroy 3 alien landing craft in the past 2 days. "Contact bearing 035, called out Yeji, his navigator. She was a former ferry captain who had volunteered the moment she heard about the resistance. Valkyrie transport, low altitude. Moving toward Incheon. Jinho raised his binoculars. The enemy ship was ugly, all black angles and pulsing lights. It was probably carrying soldiers to reinforce the occupation force in the city. That meant it was valuable. That meant it had to die. "All ships, attack formation," he said into his radio. "Target the engines. We hurt them and run. Nobody plays hero." The fishing boats spread out across the water, moving into position. The Valkyrie transport noticed them too late. By the time it turned its weapons toward the small vessels, missiles and modified grenades were already streaking toward it. The transport shields flashed and flickered. Some projectiles got through. Fire erupted along the ship's left side. It began to lose altitude, spinning toward the water. "Fall back," Jinho shouted. "All ships fall back now." They scattered like frightened birds as the transport crashed into the sea. Jinho allowed himself a small smile. Another victory. Another day of resistance. The Valkyrie generals were not smiling. In the command ship above Seoul, Vorath listened to the reports from his ground commanders. They were not good reports. Casualties were mounting. Supply lines were being attacked. Soldiers were dying in dark tunnels and empty buildings, killed by enemies they never saw. "This is not possible," said General Kethron, one of Vorath's senior officers. "We have conquered species with orbital bombardment capability, species with psychic powers, species that traveled between stars before we found them. None of them fought like this. Then, what are these creatures doing differently?" Vorath asked. Kethron hesitated. "They are not surrendering, my lord. None of them. Every city we occupy, they fight. Every tunnel we clear, they return. Every soldier we kill, 2 more appear. It is as if they do not understand that they have already lost." Vorath turned to look at the planet below. Even now, at night, he could see the fires of battle burning across the surface. These primitives had no hope of winning. Their technology was generations behind. Their weapons were crude. Their numbers were a fraction of what the Dominion could deploy, and yet they fought. "Double the ground forces," Vorath ordered. "Triple the patrols. Burn every tunnel, every building, every hole in the ground where they might hide. That will require significant resources, my lord. Then bring more resources." Vorath's 3 eyes blazed. "I will not be remembered as the commander who was defeated by animals." But deep in his mind, A small voice whispered something he did not want to hear. It asked him a simple question. What if victory was not possible? What if these creatures would rather die than kneel? In the tunnels of Dagu, Taehyun allowed his soldiers to rest for 2 hours. They sat in the darkness, eating cold rations and checking their weapons. Nobody spoke much. Words used energy, and energy was precious. Borum sat next to him, cleaning her rifle with a torn piece of cloth. "Sir," she said quietly, "do you think we can win?" Taehyun thought about the question carefully. He thought about the burning cities and the dying millions. He thought about the alien ships blocking out the sun. He thought about everything humanity had lost in just 3 days. "I do not know," he admitted. "But that is not the important question." "What is the important question?" Taehyun looked at his soldiers, these brave men and women who had chosen to fight instead of flee. He looked at the alien weapons they had collected, the maps they had drawn, the plans they had made. "The important question," he said, "is whether we can make them bleed. And the answer to that question is yes." Borum nodded slowly. That was enough. For now, that was enough. Tomorrow they would hunt again. The coffee was still hot when the sky turned red. Captain Yuna Park stood near the window of the Naval Command Building in Seoul. She had been awake for 16 hours, reviewing reports about submarine movements in the East Sea. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. She raised her cup to her lips and looked outside at the morning sky. That was when she saw the clouds catch fire. At first, she thought it was lightning. But lightning does not move downward in a straight line. Lightning does not glow orange and purple. And lightning does not come from something the size of a mountain. The cup fell from her hand and shattered on the floor. Yuna did not notice. She was already running toward the operations room, her heart beating so fast she could hear it in her ears. 12 ships descended through the burning atmosphere. Each one was larger than anything humans had ever built. They were black, like pieces of night sky that had broken off and fallen to earth. Strange lights pulsed along their surfaces in patterns that hurt to look at. They moved slowly, almost lazily, as if they had all the time in the world, because they believed they did. The Velthari Dominion had conquered 73 worlds across the galaxy. They had developed conquest into an art form. Arrive with overwhelming force. Broadcast demands. Wait for the target species to panic, fight among themselves, and collapse. Then collect whatever resources remained. It had worked every single time for thousands of years. Their commander, a creature named Vorath, stood on the bridge of the largest ship and watched Earth grow larger in the viewing screen. He had 3 eyes that burned like hot coals and scales that were darker than any shadow. He was old by Velthari standards, and he was bored. This would be his 32nd conquest. He expected it to be finished within a week. He pressed a button, and his voice echoed across every screen, every phone, every radio on the planet. "Creatures of this world," he said. His voice translated into 1,000 languages. "I am Vorath of the Velthari Dominion. Your planet now belongs to us. You have 1 hour to surrender your governments, your weapons, and your will. Kneel or be erased. There will be no second warning." He ended the transmission and turned to his second in command. "How long do you think they will take to respond?" "The usual pattern suggests 3 days of internal conflict before they accept reality," his officer replied. Vorath nodded. He settled back into his command chair and waited. He did not have to wait long. But the response was not what he expected. General Dong-Yun Kim was 61 years old. He had served in the military for 40 years. He had trained for every possible threat: invasion from the north, terrorist attacks, natural disasters. He had never trained for alien contact. No one had. But when he watched Vorath's message on the screen in his underground bunker, he did not hesitate. Authorization code 779, he said into his communicator. All units. This is not a drill. Weapons free. His aide stared at him. Sir, we should contact the Blue House. The president needs to. The president will agree with me. Dong Yun interrupted. And if he does not, he can fire me after we win. Launch everything we have. Now. Within 8 minutes, missiles rose from hidden silos across the Korean peninsula. Fighter jets scrambled from underground hangars that no satellite had ever photographed. Ships in the harbor began to move into attack formations. And across the world, other nations watched and made the same choice. The Americans launched first, followed by the Russians, then the Chinese. Old enemies and older allies set aside every difference in an instant. There was no debate, no diplomacy, no politics. Something had come from the sky and told humanity to kneel. Humanity chose to fight instead. Yuna reached the operations room just as the first missiles hit. On the screens, she watched one of the massive ships shudder as explosions bloomed against its surface. The ship did not fall. Its shields absorbed most of the damage, but it shuddered. It was possible to hurt them. They felt that, she whispered. On his command ship, Var stood so quickly that his officers stepped back in surprise. Lights flashed red across the bridge as impact warnings screamed. Through the viewing screen, he could see fire everywhere. Not on the planet below on his fleet. The primitives were shooting at him. They were actually shooting at him. Return fire, he ordered. His voice sharp with something he had not felt in centuries. Was this anger? Or was it something else? Sir, they have not surrendered. Protocol says. I know what protocol says. Vorath's 3 eyes burned brighter. These creatures are insane. Destroy their cities. Show them what happens to those who resist. The Valkyrie ships opened fire. Beams of light brighter than the sun struck Seoul, Tokyo, New York, London, Moscow. Buildings melted. Streets became rivers of glass. Millions died in seconds, but the missiles kept coming down in Bizen, 200 kilometers south of the burning capital. Minji Lee stood on her apartment balcony and watched the sky turn to fire. She was 28 years old, an engineer who designed bridges. She had never held a weapon in her life. She was shaking so badly she could barely hold her phone. Her brother was in the army. He was probably already fighting. She found his contact and typed a message with trembling fingers. What do you need? His response came 30 seconds later. Everything. Bring everything. Minji did not pack clothes. She did not grab family photos. She went to her company's warehouse and took every piece of equipment she could carry. Construction tools, electronics, metal plating. If her brother needed to build something to fight these monsters, she would give him the materials to do it. She was not alone. Across the country, across the world, ordinary people made extraordinary choices. Factory workers stayed at their posts, building weapons instead of cars. Farmers loaded their trucks with food for soldiers. Teachers organized evacuations with military precision. Doctors set up emergency hospitals and subway stations. The Valkyrie had expected panic. They had expected chaos and collapse. Instead, they found something they had never seen before. A species that united in the first hour. By the time the sun set on that first terrible day, 3 things were clear. First, the Valkyrie were powerful. Their weapons could destroy cities in moments. Their shields could stop almost anything humanity threw at them. They were, by any measure, the superior force. Second, humanity was not surrendering. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not ever. And third, the Valkyrie had made a terrible mistake. They had come to Earth expecting prey. But they had found something else entirely. They had found a species that had been at war with itself for 10,000 years. A species that had studied violence the way others studied art. a species that did not know how to kneel dot in his command ship. Vorath stared at the tactical displays and watched his casualty numbers rise. 97 soldiers dead in the first 12 hours. It was more than he had lost in his last 3 conquests combined. For the first time in a very long time, Vorath felt something cold in his chest. He did not know it yet, but it was fear.